Marcus never imagined his quiet town would turn into a nightmare, but 17-year-old Ethan changed everything. Armed, calculated, and on a carjacking spree, he terrorized Maplewood, leaving families terrified and police desperate to catch him before it was too late. In the quiet suburban streets of Maplewood, life had always followed a predictable rhythm. Children played in yards, neighbors waved from driveways, and local shops closed on time without incident. People felt safe leaving their doors unlocked and their cars parked on the street. That sense of security shattered one evening when a young driver named Marcus left his compact sedan in front of a grocery store and stepped inside for just a few minutes. When he returned, the car was gone. Panic surged through him as he realized what had happened. A small figure had approached his vehicle, brandishing a gun, and forced him to step aside. The police were called immediately, but the initial report seemed almost too shocking to believe. A teenager, armed and confident, had carried out an armed carjacking in broad daylight. Within hours, Maplewood residents began noticing patterns. Social media buzzed with warnings, and parents kept their children inside. Authorities scrambled to investigate, but the first incident provided very few clues. The teen had worn a hoodie that concealed his face, moved quickly, and left no obvious evidence behind. Surveillance cameras captured fleeting images of a small, wiry figure slipping through parking lots and alleyways, vanishing before anyone could respond. The randomness of the attacks created a sense of fear and helplessness in a community that had never experienced such brazen criminal activity. 2 nights later, the second carjacking occurred, this time near a residential area. A young mother, returning from work, reported a masked teenager forcing her from her vehicle at gunpoint and driving away in minutes. The audacity of the act stunned investigators. The teen's knowledge of the streets and escape routes indicated careful planning. Maplewood's police department had never faced a suspect so precise, so quick, and so fearless. Each subsequent carjacking intensified the fear gripping the town. Local news stations began covering the spree extensively, sharing grainy security footage and urging residents to lock their doors and report suspicious activity. Despite the heightened vigilance, the teen continued to strike. Residents reported seeing a hooded figure lurking near parked cars, and community watch groups mobilized to patrol the streets. Detectives worked tirelessly, piecing together fragments of evidence from each incident: tire tracks, fragments of a cell phone left behind, and fingerprints that offered only minimal leads. The teen seemed to thrive on the chaos, moving unpredictably from neighborhood to neighborhood, always striking at times when law enforcement presence was limited. By the end of the first week, it became clear that this was no ordinary juvenile mischief. The pattern of attack suggested someone who had studied the town's layout, identified weak points in security, and had developed a strategy to carry out multiple thefts without immediate capture. Maplewood, once a peaceful suburb, now faced a chilling reality. A young, armed, and cunning criminal was on the loose, and no one knew when or where he would strike next. Fear had replaced comfort, and the residents realized that the quiet streets they once trusted had become a stage for a dangerous game they had never imagined. The first strike was just the beginning, and the community braced itself for the possibility that this spree could escalate beyond anything they had seen before. The fear that had taken hold of Maplewood after the initial carjacking only deepened as the spree continued. Parents began keeping their children inside, schools increased security measures, and even routine errands felt risky. The local grocery store installed temporary barriers and hired extra staff to monitor the parking lot. People no longer left their cars unlocked, and many began installing tracking devices or alarm systems, hoping to prevent the next attack. Amid this rising tension, detectives worked around the clock, piecing together details from each crime scene. They noticed a pattern in the timing and location of the incidents. Nearly every carjacking occurred in late afternoon, often near areas where teens or young adults were known to congregate, like schools, skate parks, and shopping centers. The precision was alarming, suggesting the perpetrator had studied the town carefully, noting traffic patterns, security camera placement, and the habits of residents. Authorities quickly realized that this was not a series of random, impulsive acts. Each incident bore hallmarks of planning. The teen always struck when the streets were less crowded, chose vehicles that were easy to drive and unlikely to be traced, and left minimal evidence behind. Fingerprints and DNA traces were scarce, and the surveillance footage provided only fleeting glimpses of a small, hooded figure. Investigators began to suspect that the perpetrator was not only familiar with the town, but also old enough to navigate it alone, yet young enough to avoid drawing suspicion. The realization that a minor could carry out such a calculated spree sent shockwaves through the police department. Residents grew increasingly anxious as word of the carjacking spread. Some neighborhoods organized informal patrols, walking the streets at night with flashlights and cell phones, hoping to spot the teen before he struck again. Others invested in motion-sensitive cameras and alarms, turning their homes into small fortresses. Yet despite these precautions, the attacks continued. Each new report heightened anxiety, fueling speculation about the suspect's identity and motives. Rumors circulated that the teen might be part of a larger group or even emulating criminal activity he had seen online. Police, however, warned the community to remain vigilant but cautious, emphasizing that the suspect's methods were deliberate and dangerous. Forensic teams continued to collect and analyze every scrap of evidence left behind. Tiny fragments of a cell phone, partial fingerprints on car doors, and traces of clothing fibers offered small but vital clues. Investigators compared these fragments across multiple crime scenes, searching for consistencies that could lead them to the perpetrator. Each lead was carefully examined, each witness statement cross-checked. Slowly, a profile began to emerge. A teenager, likely alone, armed, bold, and capable of acting with frightening confidence. The tension in Maplewood was palpable. Residents who once took pride in their quiet, safe streets now locked their doors even during the day. Fear had transformed daily routines into strategic exercises in safety. The town had become a chessboard, with a young, cunning criminal making moves that no one saw coming. Each carjacking revealed not only the perpetrator's skill, but also the vulnerabilities in a community that had never imagined itself under siege. With each passing day, the urgency to catch the teen grew, and detectives knew that the breakthrough could come from the smallest piece of evidence, or from the sharp eyes of a watchful resident who might spot what everyone else had missed. After 3 weeks of relentless investigation, a critical breakthrough finally arrived. A resident of Maplewood, an observant retiree named Mrs. Collins, noticed a hooded teenager loitering near a convenience store in the late afternoon. Something about his behavior seemed unusual. He wasn't buying anything, merely pacing and watching the street as if waiting for someone. She reported the sighting to the local police, providing a description and the exact location. Detectives immediately acted on the tip, recognizing that it could be the first tangible lead in a spree that had left the town on edge. Police quickly secured the area and reviewed nearby surveillance footage. What they found confirmed their suspicions. The teen in Mrs. Collins's report appeared in video from multiple carjacking scenes. Though the images were blurry, his movements, posture, and even the way he held himself matched eyewitness accounts. Officers began building a timeline of his movements, connecting seemingly random incidents into a coherent pattern. It became clear that the suspect had been monitoring the streets, waiting for vulnerable targets, and striking with startling efficiency. His ability to evade capture despite multiple attempts to corner him now made sense. The teen had been planning his escapes with meticulous care. Further investigation revealed small but significant pieces of evidence left behind in stolen vehicles. Police recovered a discarded backpack containing items from previous carjackings, wallets, small electronics, and other valuables. Inside the bag, they found a partially broken cell phone, which, when analyzed, contained location data and photos that corroborated the teen's presence at several crime scenes. Each piece of evidence added weight to the growing realization that the suspect was not only young, but highly methodical, treating his crimes almost like assignments on a checklist. Authorities were shocked by the level of organization and sophistication, which seemed far beyond what they typically expected from a teenager. The profile became clearer with each new discovery. The suspect appeared to be a 17-year-old male, living within the community he had been terrorizing. His movements suggested familiarity with escape routes, surveillance blind spots, and neighborhood routines. Police surmised that he had carefully studied patterns in the town, identifying opportunities to strike while minimizing risk to himself. The meticulous planning, combined with his age, made him an unusual and dangerous threat. Someone who could commit multiple armed carjackings in broad daylight without immediate detection. With enough evidence to take decisive action, police began preparing for an arrest. They coordinated with multiple units to ensure the teen would be apprehended safely and efficiently, knowing he was armed and potentially desperate. Neighborhoods were discreetly monitored to prevent any sudden escape attempts. The officers understood that this arrest could finally end the wave of terror that had gripped Maplewood for weeks, but it also carried the risk of escalation if the suspect sensed the net closing in. In the days leading up to the operation, investigators continued to review evidence and map the teen's patterns. Each stolen vehicle, each surveillance image, and each witness account helped them anticipate his likely behavior. The community, still shaken but hopeful, watched as law enforcement quietly prepared to confront a young criminal who had managed to outwit them for weeks. The tension was palpable. Residents knew the outcome could change the course of their neighborhood's sense of safety forever. In the quiet hours before the arrest, one fact became undeniable. The teen's carjacking spree had been meticulously orchestrated, and the authorities were finally on the brink of putting an end to it. The early morning air in Maplewood was crisp and still when law enforcement moved in for the arrest. Officers had spent days planning the operation, carefully coordinating their approach to minimize risk. The suspect, a 17-year-old who had already terrorized the community for weeks, was believed to be armed and dangerous. Police positioned vehicles strategically to block potential escape routes, while undercover units monitored the teen's home and nearby streets. The tension was thick, each officer aware that even a minor misstep could turn the situation volatile. Every element of the operation had been rehearsed, but the unpredictability of a young, desperate criminal weighed heavily on everyone involved. As the first light of dawn broke over the quiet neighborhood, the teen emerged from his home, hood pulled low and backpack slung over his shoulder. In a sudden, tense moment, he attempted to flee in a stolen vehicle parked nearby. Police immediately reacted, using precision-blocking tactics to prevent escape. The teen's car skidded to a stop as officers surrounded the vehicle. Commands were shouted, and after a tense standoff that felt much longer than it actually was, the teen surrendered. He was taken into custody without injury, but the relief among the officers was tempered by the knowledge that the operation was only halfway complete. Inside the teen's home, investigators discovered a trove of incriminating evidence. Multiple stolen cars, keys, and personal belongings were found hidden in closets and under furniture. More shockingly, a notebook detailed every carjacking, complete with dates, times, and observations about each neighborhood and potential escape routes. The pages revealed a meticulous mind, a young individual who had not acted impulsively, but rather with deliberate calculation. The notebook also contained sketches of street layouts, camera positions, and even hypothetical scenarios for avoiding law enforcement. Detectives were stunned by the level of preparation, realizing that this was not a reckless youth acting on impulse, but someone who had meticulously orchestrated a series of armed crimes. Forensic teams carefully collected evidence, photographing and cataloging each item for use in court. Officers also recovered multiple firearms, small but lethal, which had been used in the carjackings. The teen's digital devices were seized, revealing location data, photographs, and messages that corroborated witness statements and surveillance footage. Each discovery painted a clearer picture of the suspect's methods and motivations, confirming the fears that had haunted Maplewood for weeks. The sophistication and audacity of the crimes left investigators both impressed and disturbed, forcing them to confront the reality that someone so young could carry out violent, calculated acts with such precision. As news of the arrest spread, the community reacted with a mixture of relief and disbelief. Parents no longer had to worry about sending their children to nearby stores alone, and residents began reclaiming the streets that had felt dangerous for weeks. Yet the shock remained. A teenager, barely old enough to drive legally, had executed a string of armed carjackings that had terrorized entire neighborhoods. Police credited the success of the operation to careful planning, precise execution, and critical tips from alert community members. Maplewood's sense of safety slowly returned, but the events left an indelible mark on the town. The arrest ended the immediate threat, but the questions it raised about youth, criminal intent, and the consequences of early exposure to violence lingered, sparking a conversation that would continue long after the teen was taken into custody. The aftermath of the teen's arrest sent ripples through Maplewood and beyond. News outlets covered the story extensively, highlighting both the audacity of the carjacking spree and the young age of the suspect. Residents who had spent weeks in fear now cautiously returned to their routines, but the sense of vulnerability lingered. Parents who had once allowed their children to walk to school or ride their bikes freely now kept a closer watch, and local businesses reviewed their security measures to prevent future incidents. The town had been shaken to its core, and the events prompted conversations about safety, community vigilance, and the challenges of preventing youth crime. The teen was charged with multiple counts of armed robbery, carjacking, and possession of illegal firearms. Court proceedings drew significant attention due to the combination of his age and the severity of his crimes. Legal experts debated how to handle a minor capable of planning and executing a series of violent acts with such precision. Prosecutors argued for serious penalties, citing the threat to public safety, while defense teams emphasized the suspect's age and potential for rehabilitation. The courtroom became a space where the community confronted the tension between justice, accountability, and the possibility of redemption for a teenager who had already caused so much chaos. During investigations and trials, details about the teen's background emerged. Neighbors described a troubled home life, limited supervision, and exposure to environments that may have influenced his fascination with criminal activity. Psychologists and social workers testified about the risks of early exposure to violence and the psychological factors that could drive a minor toward criminal behavior. Experts highlighted the combination of curiosity, opportunity, and peer influence that often leads to youth involvement in serious offenses. The revelations sparked broader discussions about the role of families, schools, and social services in preventing similar crimes. Community healing was gradual. Residents who had been deeply affected by the spree shared their experiences, recounting the fear and anxiety that had gripped them for weeks. Neighborhood watch programs became more organized, and local authorities emphasized community engagement as a tool for preventing future crimes. Maplewood slowly began to reclaim its sense of safety, but the memory of the carjackings remained vivid. The arrest had ended the immediate threat, yet the impact of the teen's actions lingered in the form of heightened awareness, a reevaluation of safety habits, and ongoing concern for the vulnerabilities of suburban communities. In the end, the Maplewood carjacking spree became a cautionary tale. It illustrated how quickly ordinary life could be disrupted by a single individual, regardless of age, and underscored the importance of vigilance, preparedness, and community cooperation. While law enforcement successfully apprehended the teen and recovered stolen property, the broader lessons extended beyond arrests and court cases. Families, educators, and community leaders were forced to reflect on the delicate balance between nurturing youth and preventing harmful behavior. and Maplewood's residents emerged with a renewed commitment to protecting their streets. The town had endured fear and uncertainty, faced a shocking revelation about the potential for youth violence, and ultimately found a path toward resilience, proving that even in the wake of disturbing events, a community could come together to restore safety and trust.